Hello everyone, and welcome back. I'm sure by now everybody has gotten at least 1 or 2 attempts at the tanking challenge, and it is very difficult. Now this tanking challenge was geared appropriately for when we have Tomb of Sargeras gear, which is an average of 20 item levels higher. But regardless of that, this challenge is very difficult, and let's go over exactly what you can do to increase your odds at beating this challenge. Now what I will tell you is that I'm walking in as a heroic Nighthold geared tank. I am currently item level 900. I have my 2 best in slot legendaries for some of these attempts. Other ones I didn't have it yet. I got my bracers late last night. But what you should still be doing regardless of your gear is at least eating buff food. Now you should also be popping your elixir and your runes if you're starting to get close to either beating the Inquisitor or Kruul himself. But the food of choice is bear tartare. Now the reason why this is there's a ton of ads during this encounter, and there's also a lot of distance you need to traverse, be it between eyes, the Inquisitor, or healing orbs, and bear tartare will provide you that extra speed necessary to cut those distances. So the first thing you'll see when you walk in is this big platform. Now with this big platform, you don't want to use all of the space. You basically have a spot where Velen is going to be sitting and a spot where the Inquisitor is going to be sitting. You're going to be wanting to jump around between these 2 points the most. If you have a few cooldowns to spare, or you're attacking a specific eye, then you can also jump around the platform, but be very aware of exactly where Velen is for those healing orbs. Now the first thing you need to know is that this Inquisitor boss is always casting. You can interrupt him, you can kick him, you can stun him, you can do whatever you want to him, but he will always just start another cast immediately after. So let's go over exactly what each mob does in this scenario. Then we'll go over the general strategy of how to beat it. Now the first one up is the Inquisitor, and he is the boss that you need to beat in order to get Kruul down. So as soon as you beat the Inquisitor, phase 2 will begin, but he is very difficult to get down. Now the first thing he will do is he will always cast Mind Rend. Now what Mind Rend is a shadow ability that will hit you for 2.2 million damage. Now if you're a monk with stagger, this will hit you up front for less, but the cast itself is set for about 2.2 million magic damage. Something else that he will cast about every 30 seconds is Life Drain, and this doesn't hit terribly hard. The damage it does is kind of medium, but it heals the boss to full if he gets the cast off. So this is the spell you need to interrupt 100% of the time. Also, you'll notice the AoE around his feet. This is the Aura of Decay, and every 2 seconds you stand in it, you will get 1 stack of a debuff, and what this debuff does is it reduces your total stamina by 8%, and this does stack. So the longer you're in there, the less health you'll have. You'll eventually just get one shot by a Mind Rend. The next mob we have in this encounter is the Tormenting Eye. Now these eyes are low HP, and they're very similar to the eyes that you encounter in Vault of the Wardens, except these can actually be damaged. So one good thing to keep in mind is that since they are low HP, if you're playing something like a prot warrior and getting a killing blow will help you out with Victory Rush, target these mobs and they will go down very quickly. But remember, if they're casting a beam at you, you have to face them. If you are not facing them when the cast finishes, you will get knocked back 30 or 40 yards, fall off the platform, and you will die. The only other caveat to these eyes is Guardian Druids cannot do any physical damage to them. They're immune to physical damage for Guardian Druids, so take them down with some Moonfires. Up next we have the Infernal. The Infernal will slowly cast AoE spells at the cost of its own life, and when the Infernal hits 20% HP, it will start taking increased physical damage. So typically what I do to Infernals is kite them around the platform, move around them. Once they have 20% HP, that's when I start cleaving them and take them down. But you do have to know that Infernals never die. When their HP goes down to 0, they start a very slow resurrection process and bring themselves back up to full when that cast is done. So they kind of work as a softened rage timer because more and more will be added and you will eventually be overrun if you can even last that long. The last thing the Infernals do is Smash, which is a frontal line ability. It does a lot of damage and it knocks you back 30 or 40 yards, knocking you off the platform. So what you want to do when you have Infernals active is keep kiting them and also keep sidestepping them if you're walking anywhere near them so that that smash misses you. The very last ad we have during this encounter are the Nether Horrors. Now these do medium physical and arcane damage. The one thing that they do is add a stacking debuff on you that increases the amount of arcane damage that you actually do take, and they do end up casting casting Nether Storm, and they can cast it while they're moving, and once this cast time finishes, they will do a huge amount of arcane damage. Think the arcane adds in Spellblade Allurial and Nighthold. Once they're done casting Annihilation, big massive arcane damage goes off and you will go down. So you have to passively cleave these, but you can't ignore them either. Now before we start going over exactly what you should be doing and how the strategy breaks down, be aware that to walk into a place like this and to do this challenge, you will need to respec, you will need to try very different things. For protection warriors, the few protection warriors that have gotten this skin have been running the legendary bracers and the legendary belt. Be aware that even though those are not the two best in slot, they actually work a lot better for this challenge. So one thing that I highly suggest before going in here is to talent into a stun so that you have an interrupt and a stun. Now for warriors, Stormbolt is the choice and the way to go, just because you want a stun up about every 30 seconds. You want to be interrupting every cast that you can for the Inquisitor, but every time he casts a life drain, what you want to do is use your stun since it's on about a 30-second rotation regardless. Now for phase 1, what I will list here is the priorities and what you should be doing throughout all of phase 1. If you have no stacks of Aura of Decay on you, then you should be DPSing the boss and using your interrupt as much as you can until you get 3 or 4 stacks of the Aura of Decay debuff, at which point you should run out. You should never have more than 5 stacks of this debuff. I do 3 to 4 to be safe, but you should never have more than 5. And using your regular interrupt for that Mind Rend ability will start mitigating some of that damage. What you should do as soon as you run out with those 3 and 4 stacks is use an ability that's going to lower the amount of damage that you take in, whether that's an ability that's going to go on the boss as a debuff or an ability on yourself as a buff. For Prot Warriors, I use Demoralizing Shout at this point, which lowers the amount of damage the target does to me by 20%. So again, if you have no stacks, run into the boss, damage, use interrupts. When you run out, use a damage dampener ability either on yourself or on the boss. And once that wears off, if there is still no healing orb available from Velen, then you should use any magic mitigation abilities you have, Anti-Magic Shell, Spell Reflect, or whatever pertains to your class. This could also be an absorption trinket. On a side note, if you want my weak aura here that tracks the Aura of Decay stacks and actually flashes when it has less than 3 seconds, so you can start running your way over to the Inquisitor, link is in the paste bin down below. Go ahead and look at the description and the link will be there. Now let's say you're meeting all this criteria, you have ads up, you're starting to cleave them, you have stacks. What you should be doing is grabbing the healing orbs. Now what this healing orb does is it's a full heal on yourself, on Velen, and it actually blinds and disorients every hostile mob on the platform for about 3 seconds. Something to note is that this healing orb can actually be used as an interrupt as well in case you're stunned and your interrupt are down for the life drain. So just to recap all of phase 1, if you have no stacks, you should be DPSing the boss and interrupting as many casts as you can. You should always save your stun to interrupt the life drain. You can also interrupt life drain by healing yourself. If you're not DPSing the boss, you should be taking all of these ads relatively close to Velen so that when he drops the healing orb, you can jump into it as soon as possible. And healing orbs spawn about once every 30 seconds. While you're doing all of this, you should be staring at the eyes so that they don't knock you back and dancing around Infernals so that they don't knock you back as well. I realize this is a lot. This challenge is very, very difficult, but let's move on to phase 2. Now, unfortunately, in my 30 to 40 attempts, I didn't get to phase 2, but there are a few people that have, and let's go over what exactly happens in phase 2. So in phase 2, Kruul lands and he starts casting some of his spells. Now, while Kruul is active, you still have Infernals and Nether Horrors. So be aware that you're still going to have a lot of ads on you, and we've gone over exactly what the Infernals and Nether Horrors do. So let's go over what Kruul does. Kruul has 3 abilities. Annihilate, which is a stackable debuff and will increase the damage you take. Nether Stomp, which he flies up into the air, stomps down on the ground and leaves a patch of Fellfire on the ground. And Twisted Reflections, which will end up healing him and make the fight impossible to continue. So Annihilate is a move that's interruptible, so you should treat Annihilate the exact same way that you treated Mindseer with the first boss. When Kruul actually does do a Nether Stomp, he will hurt himself, so you don't need to do as much damage to him as you might think. He will passively be hurting himself, and you should treat Twisted Reflections like the life drain from phase 1. So save your stuns specifically for that time. When he casts that should always be either interrupted or stunned. Whatever it is that you need to do, grab a life orb. Do not let him cast Twisted Reflections ever. Something else that happens during this phase, in case you didn't have enough things to manage, is these purple tethers, like lines, will slide across the platform and try to knock you off. What this means is that even though you're kiting Kruul and keeping him out of Felfire, you can't dance around the edge of the platform because you might get caught in a weird position and knocked off by these purple hands. If one of these purple lines is going to cross you, run into it so that it doesn't knock you back as much as it would otherwise. So to wrap up phase 2, interrupt annihilate as much as you can, run out of the fire for Nether Stomp, make sure you 100% of the time interrupt Twisted Reflections, and pick up healing orbs when you need them or when you need an interrupt. My parting thoughts with this challenge is that it is very, very difficult. However, once Tomb of Sargeras comes out and we all get gear from there, we should jump up 20 to 30 item levels, which should help make this challenge a little bit easier. This challenge is not for everyone and probably won't be completed by a large majority of the player base. So don't be disheartened if you can't do this challenge. It is very difficult, but remember to increase your chances while doing this. You can set up more weak auras for yourself. I set up 2 more weak auras for myself, one for my interrupt and one for a shorter cooldown to use to actually increase my survivability as well. If you guys have any additional questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section down below. Also, if you would like to help support the channel, you can go ahead and visit my Patreon here. It is also linked in the description down below. This will help support the channel, help me create more guides just like this one in the future. And as always, good luck tanking out there.